Okay, hello everyone. Thanks for tuning in. This is going to be a brief presentation on Whistleblowers by myself, Zach Friedman, and my two partners, Chase Summers and Natalie Tran. And so, before we begin, I want to give a brief foreword on the format of this presentation. We're going to start out very broadly. We're going to define what a whistleblower is. We're going to show you some of the legislation that's in place to protect them. And we're going to present the idea that they are essential to democracy, which was a theme that we found central in writing our paper as we shifted our focus more specifically to Edward Snowden's case. His is particularly interesting because, first and foremost, it relates directly to computer ethics. Aside from that, it was highly controversial, and it left one segment of the population who declared him a traitor and say that he put the nation at risk by exposing the secrets that he did, and another segment who says that he's a hero and he revealed information that the public deserved to know. So after we present the facts in his case, we'll shift to the more open-ended questions that are left as a result of his actions. We'll kind of explore how the world was affected. So without further ado, what is a whistleblower? A whistleblower is anybody who exposes wrongdoing or negligence within an industry or within government to an authority. And there are protections in place for these people. The United States began explicitly protecting whistleblowers under the Whistleblower Protection Act of 1989. However, the protections under that legislation extend only to federal employees. The sentiment of protecting whistleblowers can be found in legislation as far back as 1863 with the False Claims Act and the Freedom of Information Act of 1966. Both of these provide protections for people coming forward with information about faulty products or services that are being sold to the government. There are a few exemptions in place, but protections nonetheless. A few notable whistleblowers are Daniel Ellsberg. He released the Pentagon Papers, which showed a substantial amount of deception towards the American public with regards to the Vietnam War. More recently, John Doe revealed that there were offshore shell companies harboring shady business in the Panama Papers. And in an op-ed about the Panama Papers in the LA Times, I found this quote: "Society cannot thank John Doe enough." And that statement seems a bit heavy-handed, but in reality, I don't think it is. Whistleblowers are essential. With that being said, we'll hand it over to Natalie and focus on Edward Snowden's case.
Thank you, Zach. Now I'm going to talk about Edward Snowden's background and his case summary. Both of his parents worked for the government. His mom was a clerk at the U.S. District Court. His father served in the National Coast Guard. He's a self-proclaimed computer wizard. Even though he did not have any bachelor degree, he is considered, quote, a genius among geniuses, end quote, according to an NSA staffer. Snowden worked at the CIA before working for the NSA as a subcontractor. And this is where he discovered the massive surveillance programs, such as PRISM or X-Keyscores. So the program basically secretly collected, analyzed, and stored user data such as messages, social media, emails, geolocation, and browsing histories. Know this, since he was a subcontractor, he did not take an oath to protect classified information like other federal employees. Instead, he took an oath to defend the Constitution. Therefore, he secretly downloaded classified files and leaked some of them to the press. This resulted in 3 charges against him from the government. One of them is theft of government property, and the other 2 are 2 counts of violating the Espionage Act of 1917. This could potentially put him in prison for 30 years. So what makes this case so controversial? First of all, is the exposure of the government's abuse of power. In a TED Talk, an English journalist, Luke Harding, mentioned that the mass surveillance program doesn't just spy on people within the US, but globally. Moreover, The NSA can secretly turn on your microphone to eavesdrop on your conversation. Also, according to an interview with The Guardian, Edward Snowden claimed that, quote, I, sitting at my desk, certainly had the authority to wiretap anyone from you, your accountant, your federal judge, or even the president if I had a personal email address, end quote. The second factor is the revelation of national classified documents. Experts estimated that Edward Snowden stole somewhere between 50,000 to 200,000 classified documents. The third factor that makes this case controversial is the deficiency of the law. There are many laws that protect whistleblowers within the government. However, these acts or laws, as you may, only protect federal employees, not subcontractors like Edward Snowden. So there are many questions comes in after Edward Snowden's discovery. First of all, did his action affect the government? The answer is yes. Revealing national secrets can put undercover agents and military troops' lives in danger. However, there's no actual proof of any damage that Edward Snowden has done to the US. According to Glenn Walt, it's been almost 5 years since newspapers around the world began reporting on Snowden's archive. However, there's no evidence of a single case of a life being threatened or endangered, end quote, according to Denver Post. The question number two is, could Edward Snowden have gained personal benefits for blowing the whistle? Absolutely. In an interview with The Guardian, he said that if he wanted to harm the US government, he could have snuck out secrets and sell them to Russia, or even shut down the surveillance system in an afternoon, but that wasn't his intention. So why did he choose to reveal his identity then? He actually requested The Guardian to reveal his identity because he didn't fear the consequences and to avoid being demonized by the government. By reporting this wrongdoing as a former NSA subcontractor, he hoped that people realize what's happening in the US. Does anyone remember the case of the Watergate? This actually was reported by an anonymous whistleblower. He is an associate director of the FBI at the time, Mark Felt. He was fearful of the government's retaliation, so he anonymously reported the incident to the Washington Post under the name Deep Throat. And he did not reveal his true identity until 30 years later. Had Edward Snowden reported anonymously like Mark Felt, he probably wouldn't have lost everything and earned the label of traitor. And now he has to run away from his own country. And he'll probably have to look over his shoulder for the rest of his life now. Next, Chase is going to talk about where's the line of whistleblowers.
Thanks, Natalie. Whistleblowers are generally seen as brave as they often put themselves in a dangerous position to expose the wrongdoing of others. Yet, Edward Snowden has caught a lot of flack for coming forward. This section will cover why Edward Snowden should be seen as a vigilante rather than a criminal. So you might be wondering, why did Edward Snowden come forward? It's simple. Snowden was witnessing something ethically wrong with the way the US government was being operated, and his concerns were never addressed. Throughout Snowden's tenure with the government, Snowden witnessed numerous abuses of power. From the CIA regularly passing raw private communications content as well as metadata to an Israeli intelligence, to the NSA's Mission Data Repository in Utah, a secret 1 million square foot building that is potentially capable of holding upwards of a yottabyte of data, including billions of phone calls, faxes, emails, computer to computer data transfers, and text messages from around the world. Snowden initially wanted to find a solution internally, yet when Snowden raised his concerns to his boss and other higher-ups, none of them wanted to discuss the matter and took no further action. Snowden had reached his breaking point when James Clapper, the now former NSA director, lied in a Senate committee hearing. When James was asked whether the NSA was spying on millions or hundreds of thousands of Americans, James responded with, quote, "not wittingly," end quote, a statement that both James and Snowden knew to be false. It wasn't until this point that Snowden realized that this corruption would not sort itself out, and took matters into his own hands. After knowing why he stepped forward, I, for one, support his actions and believe the change was necessary to make the American people aware. On the contrary, I don't condone the actions of the government. In fact, personally, I'm in favor of giving up some privacy in the name of security. However, that is a decision that the American people should be made aware of beforehand. I'd like to leave you with a quote from Snowden in an exclusive interview with The Guardian. "If living unfreely but comfortably is something you're willing to accept, you can get up every day, go to work, and collect your large paycheck for relatively little work against the public interest and go to sleep at night after watching your shows. But if you realize that's the world you helped create, and it's going to get worse with the next generation, and the next generation who extend the capabilities of this sort of architecture of oppression. You realize you might be willing to accept any risk, and it doesn't matter what the outcome is, as matter as the public gets to decide how it's applied. I'm willing to sacrifice all of that because I can't, in good conscience, allow the US government to destroy privacy, internet freedom, and basic liberties for people around the world with this massive surveillance machine they're secretly building."